Welcome back to another episode of the Pax, What She Said podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Maggie Loney, joined as always by Perri Goldstein. We have just watched the Packers make their first pick in the 2024 NFL Draft, selecting offensive tackle Jordan Morgan out of Arizona. Perri, we know this isn't going to take very long, right? What are your thoughts on the Packers picking a tackle? Who was on the board? We'll talk about it, but thoughts on the initial selection?
Definitely a little surprising. I think just like given the way the board was falling all night, it was like, oh my God, they're gonna have so many choices. Look at all the choices, all the corners are falling. Could they trade up? And like we were so highly focused on defense, then um they went and took an offensive lineman, which again, we have been saying all lead up to the draft. Position of need. This is a great year to need an offensive lineman, an offensive tackle. um, I'm not going to pretend that Jordan Morgan was on my list of guys that I thought they were going to take in the first round, quite frankly. But I will say that I know he was ranked, as like Dane Brugler's number 2 guard prospect. He was PFF's number 6 offensive line player. So he's highly regarded. He's super versatile. All of his stats, and the way that he tested fit perfectly into the Packers profile. He has a 9.24 RAS as a tackle. He's made starts at left tackle. He is pretty much everything the Packers look for in an offensive lineman. So when you're looking at him just like on paper, it makes perfect sense. I just think from the way the night was unfolding as a whole, it was surprising. But my gut reaction is great, protect Jordan Love. That's what you want. You have your franchise quarterback, you have your offensive weapons, you have your new running back. Go protect the quarterback and go create some run lanes.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, right? And Packers fans historically get their hopes up. We saw it last year with Jackson Smith-Njigba being on the board for the Packers, and then they took Lucas Van Ness, who, didn't start in college. And the Packers kind of have their way of doing things. And I think what makes them so unique is that they don't necessarily always take players that they need to start immediately. Rashawn Gary, another example of that. They selected him in the top 15 when they had Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily sure that Jordan Morgan is going to come in and be one of the best 5. And I don't necessarily think that the Packers expect him to. I think that Adam Stenavich is up for the challenge. I think that Brian Gutekunst loves his upside. And I think that that's what matters. They talked about position versatility. He can play tackle. He's an immediate third tackle on their depth chart to be that swing tackle. He can kick inside, possibly compete with Sean Ryan immediately for that right guard job. So those are all things that Goody looks for, right? 6'5", 311 pounds. And I think what matters the most here is that he started 37 starts at left tackle in college. And what do the Packers do historically, right? They take their left tackles and they let them play anywhere.
Exactly.
So yes, I realize, right, that Cooper DeJean was there, Graham Barton was there, who went one pick later to Tampa. Like, there's a lot of players that Packers fans got really excited about, and I understand that. But I do think that the Morgan pick makes sense, not necessarily when it comes to an immediate impact in 2024. And I get why that's frustrating to Packers fans. But when you're looking at a long term development and being in your best 5 offensive linemen, I think sooner rather than later, he immediately comes into that conversation and he can play multiple spots for a long time. So I get the Packers fans' frustrations, like I said, of, having names on the board that you covet a little bit more. But I also am not sure I agree with the fact that people think he would have been there at 41 or later on day 2, because tackle is a premium position in the NFL and it's a needed spot for a lot of teams.
Well, we just watched Barton and Guyton go basically immediately afterwards. So you don't know that he would still have been there. And clearly the Packers thought that he was the best offensive lineman left on the board. They had him valued high. So go and get your guy. And to your point, we don't know if he's not going to be a starter in the
Mhm.
2024 season. It's a long season, and offensive linemen are incredibly injury prone. It is a very difficult position to play, hard on your body. And your Good said it. Like, we can't anticipate there. We know what our needs are now, but we can't anticipate what our needs are going to be in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year. So I think it's just too important. And we knew going into this draft that the Packers were going to take multiple offensive linemen, whether that was going to be first round, third round, sixth round, third round, sixth round, seventh round, like they always do, all late. I think it is a little bit jarring to see the Packers take an offensive lineman this early because they haven't done it in over a decade. They usually do it in the later rounds, right? They find those hidden gems, but it's just different this year. The prospects are different. The needs are different. Their quarterback is at a different point in his career than we've had in quite a while. So we just don't know. He might end up being a starter by like week 6. Like we have no idea. But I don't think it's ever a bad thing to be going into camp with multiple options at
And that's what
tackle.
happened. That's what happened with Elgin Jenkins, right? Like, he did not technically win out the starting spot, and then Lane Taylor got hurt right away early in the season, and Jenkins came in and never gave the job back, and then he plays
Right.
anywhere. And, as we're recording this, because we want to get this reaction out there, Jordan Morgan is on the phone with the Packers, and he's answering questions from the media, and he has said, like, I can play anywhere. I just want to win. So I do think that immediately going into camp, you're going to see him get some looks at left tackle. He'll get looks at right tackle. He'll get looks at right guard. I think the Packers will see where he fits. And they're so big, right? Adam Stenavich, Matt LaFleur, they always talk about having their best 5 offensive linemen out there. And I think offensive line is one of those positions too. Like, we need to realize this isn't going to inhibit them from taking someone else on day 2 or day 3. Like, they're probably going to leave this draft with 3 or 4 big guys because that's what they do. And they value depth and they value competition. And as we saw, unfortunately, throughout the season, like, you're one injury away from rotating and shuffling your entire line. So Morgan is a little bit more of a project than maybe some of the other tackles that were available, but where the Packers were picking and given what the board looked like, I think it's such a Packers pick, the same way that Lucas Van Ness was a Packers pick last season, right?
So Packers.
And we've talked about it. Brian Gutekunst has deserved that grace from Packers fans to be able to go out and say, hey, I'd rather take a guy too early than go draft for an 80 or too late. So to me, I'm fine with it. I think there's a ton of options left here for the Packers on day 2. So maybe let's segue into that. Tons of names still on the board as we see kind of the end of round 1 close out. Given that the Packers have invested that first round pick in an offensive tackle or a versatile lineman, I guess if you want to make it more general, where do you see them going? 4 picks on day 2. So really a lot of options. Do they move around? Do they stand pat with 4? Do they move up? What are you thinking and where are you going?
Well, I'm glad you segued this way because I think my next point was going to be like people love to look at the first round as like an indication of the way this draft is going to go. And you forget that like it's just 1 pick. The Packers still have 10 picks to go. Like this draft is far from over. And they have still, what is it, 4 more top 100 picks?
Yeah.
Like tons of value still. And I really do think that this draft's like sweet spot is still to come. It's the second round. So I think safety is going to be at play at 41. You and I have talked ad nauseum about a number of safeties we really like. Definitely at play. I think some of the top linebackers are definitely at play. Adrian Cooper is probably someone I would have my eye on there. He also came in for a visit. I think they can definitely still go offensive weapon if they want. Running back, wide receiver, not off the board, maybe a little bit later. So they're in a really good spot here. I also think Goot can move around. He's got his 2 second-round picks. He has two third-round picks.
Yep.
Yeah, 2 third-round picks. So a lot still to be done on day 2. A lot. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I agree. Just really quickly, I want to circle back because, like I said before, as we're recording this, Jordan Morgan is talking to the media, and he actually listed David Bakhtiari as one of the players that he studied a lot preparing for all of this and just models his game after. So I think that's a really cool moment. And we saw David Bakhtiari shout him out on Twitter. So really special there
To that point, too, one of his knocks is the short arms. And every time
right. I
people say
love that.
I'm like, do we not forget that that was like David Bakhtiari's whole knock too, and then it like literally did not matter at all.
Yeah, but like to go back to the conversation, we're looking at there's only a couple picks left, so potentially some of these guys could go, but really nice corners still on the board for
Mhm.
the Packers if they want to go that route. A couple safeties. You and I talked about Jaden Hicks, loving him. Cole Bishop is there. Javon Bullard, Tyke Smith. I think potentially on day 3 is a fun fit. Obviously Oladapo I have to talk about, but
Of
yeah,
course.
so some good safeties left. Junior Colson from Michigan, another inside linebacker. Brandon Coleman. I don't think the Packers are done at offensive line as well. Like, I think we're going to
Mhm.
see them take at least 2 more of those guys just to round out the room because you never know what's going to happen in that room. So yeah, I think there's going to be some skill position players involved here, potentially a wide receiver earlier than we expect, certainly a running back at some point. I think on day 2, maybe day 3, depending on how they're feeling and how the boards fall. But yeah, this is one pick, guys. It is at a position of need, whether or not, you know, Morgan probably wasn't the highest on anybody's board necessarily compared to some of the other tackles that were available, but really like his position versatility and he just fits
Yeah.
what the Packers were looking to do. So hang in
Yeah.
there. Packers have 10 picks left, might trade a couple, might grab a couple more, but 10-ish picks left over the next couple days. And the draft is in one night. We always say that. And the Packers are going to find their guys.
Don't forget, the Packers are about to pay big money to 10, big money to 10, and you want to keep him upright. You want him playing every game into the playoffs and to a Super Bowl. And how do you do that? With the big boys up front. They are super important. It's not sexy. It's not exciting. It's not Terry and Arnold falling to 25 as she cries into her microphone.
And I
But
think
it's
like this is the
important.
right. And this is where it gets interesting because we're starting to already think, where do the Packers view him? Do they see him competing at right guard with Sean Ryan? Do they see him at right tackle and Zach Tom moving inside? Like, there are so many options. And that's what happens when you take versatile linemen who can play just about anywhere. And as much as I say that, like knowing I would have loved Demarius Mims, who's only a tackle, but regardless, this is the Packer way. And there are 10 more picks coming your way tomorrow and on Saturday. So thank you as always, for listening to the Packs What She Said podcast. We will be back to recap the draft in its entirety. Once all of those picks are made, we'll talk about all of them, our favorites, some that kind of shocked us, who we liked, and who we're still scratching our heads on. But 2024 NFL draft is finally here. We have waited so long. The Packers at pick 25 stay put and select Jordan Morgan, the offensive tackle out of Arizona. Thank you, as always, for listening to the show. You can find us on YouTube or on Twitter at PWSS Podcast. You can find Perri on Twitter at Perri_Goldstein. You can find me on Twitter at Maggie J. Loney. And we'll be here talking about the draft because we love
Yeah,
it.
we will.
So stay with us for days 2 and 3. Thank you as always, and go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.